Imagine being at work every single day. No weekends, no breaks, no chance to even step outside your office for 250 days straight. And oh yeah, your office is a steel fortress floating in the middle of a hostile ocean. Wow. So 250 isn't just a number here, it represents a grueling, absolutely record-breaking stretch of consecutive days that the crew of a United States supercarrier spent continuously deployed at sea back in 2026.
Welcome to The Explainer, everyone. I'm so thrilled you're here. Today, we're going to unpack the truly fascinating story of the USS Abraham Lincoln, or as it's known by its hull classification, CVN-72. Now, this Nimitz-class supercarrier is, without a doubt, an engineering marvel. But what makes this ship so captivating is its dual nature. It is simultaneously this unparalleled instrument of destructive military power and a massive floating engine for global humanitarian hope. And recently, it found itself right at the very center of one of the most intense geopolitical flashpoints of our time.
So, here's our agenda for today. First, we'll look at the anatomy of a supercarrier. Second, a history of its global operations. Third, delivering hope. Fourth, projecting power. And finally, we'll dive into that tense 2026 deployment.
Okay, starting with part 1, anatomy of a supercarrier. To really grasp the significance of the operations we're about to discuss, we first have to understand the sheer magnitude of the machine itself. Because honestly, the Abraham Lincoln is way less of a boat and much more of a floating, self-sustaining city.
The scale of this vessel is just staggering. It spans 1,092 feet and displaces well over 100,000 tons of water. To put that into perspective, that's roughly the equivalent weight of 50,000 cars all packed together. Its propulsion comes from two A4W nuclear reactors, which allows it to hit speeds exceeding 30 knots. And maybe the most mind-boggling part? It houses a crew of approximately 5,680 people when you combine the ship's company and the embarked air wing. That is literally the population of a small town.
And the muscle behind all that mass? It's pushing 260,000 shaft horsepower generated by those two nuclear reactors. This immense power doesn't just shove a 100,000-ton steel behemoth through the water at high speeds, it actually powers a catapult system that can fling fully loaded fighter jets into the sky in a matter of seconds. Plus, it provides electricity for almost 6,000 people living on board.
A city this important obviously needs to be heavily defended. The carrier is armed with Mk-57 Sea Sparrow and RIM-116 rolling airframe missiles for air defense. It also boasts the Phalanx Close-In Weapon System, or CIWS. They actually tested this in a live-fire drill in the South China Sea in January 2026, basically to prove it could counter close-range drones and swarm boats. But above all that, its primary defense, and offense, is its massive capacity to carry up to 90 fixed-wing aircraft and helicopters.
Moving on to part 2, a history of global operations. You don't build a machine of this scale just to let it sit in a harbor. For over 3 decades, the Abraham Lincoln has been a primary instrument of U.S. foreign policy all around the globe. The story begins with its keel being laid in 1984, followed by its official commissioning in 1989. And the ship didn't wait long at all to see action. In 1993, it supported Operation Restore Hope in Somalia, flying patrols over Mogadishu. Fast forward to 2003, and it was heavily involved in Iraq operations, enduring a real marathon deployments. Then, to keep a nuclear ship running for its full 50-year lifespan, it underwent a massive refueling complex overhaul between 2013 and 2017.
Which brings us to part 3, delivering hope, humanitarian missions. Here is where we pivot to that thematic duality I brought up earlier. While it is undoubtedly a warship, the Abraham Lincoln has also served as one of the most effective global lifesavers in modern history.
Just consider its capacity for pure humanitarian relief. We're talking about delivering over 5.9 million pounds of supplies after the devastating 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami. Now, contrast that directly with launching highly advanced F-35C combat sorties in the Middle East in 2024. It is this stunning paradox, right? It's the same vessel utilizing the exact same logistical infrastructure, but seamlessly shifting between devastating combat and massive disaster relief.
During Operation Unified Assistance, following that 2004 tsunami, the sheer scale of relief was staggering. 2.9 million pounds of food, 748,000 pounds of medical supplies, and they executed 1,747 flight missions to pull it off. In fact, here's an amazing detail. The ship's engineering department actually designed and built a potable water manifold from scratch just to pump desperately needed fresh water to the victims in Aceh province. They literally engineered life-saving solutions on the fly.
All right, part 4, projecting power, combat operations. Now let's flip the coin and look at the other half of the ship's identity, its role as a highly potent fighter, projecting immense power across the globe, especially in recent modern warfare.
The 2024 deployment to the Middle East and Indo-Pacific was practically a historic run of naval firsts. First, it marked the initial combat employment of the F-35C Lightning II variant, conducting strikes in November 2024 to degrade Iranian-backed Houthi rebel capabilities in Yemen. Second, we saw the first combat use of the ALQ-249 next-generation jammer on its Growler aircraft, which is just a massive leap in electronic warfare. And finally, it conducted a pioneering multi-large deck event alongside the Italian Navy's aircraft carrier, the Cavour.
But behind all these impressive technical milestones are the actual people. As the ship's commanding officer at the time, Captain Pete Reeb, noted, the men and women of Lincoln Nation should stand tall knowing they performed admirably in the face of uncertainty. It's a really good reminder that even when we talk about advanced jets and radar jammers, navigating these massive geopolitical conflicts requires exceptional human resilience under extreme pressure. Which brings us to Part 5, the tense 2026 deployment. This is really the climax of our explainer. Because what happens when that human resilience is stretched to its absolute breaking point? Let's examine the incredibly tense events of 2026. I want you to actively consider this for a second. What actually happens when a crew is pushed beyond its limits? It's one thing to run a floating city for a few months, but it is an entirely different beast to maintain peak combat readiness, completely surrounded by active threats for nearly a year without ever setting foot on dry land. The sequence of events in 2026 was just relentless. In February, the U.S. military had to shoot down an Iranian drone that was approaching the Abraham Lincoln in the Arabian Sea. Tensions escalated again in March when Iranian state media made these heavy, though completely unverified claims that they had actually hit the carrier with ballistic missiles. And through all of this, the ship just kept operating. By August 2026, the crew had been stuck on board for over 200 consecutive days without a single port call. The severity of the situation reached all the way to the top of the defense establishment. In an August 2026 memo, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth stated, "The flagship of Carrier Strike Group 3 has not made a port call in over 200 days, setting a record for consecutive days at sea." They originally departed in November 2025 for what was supposed to be a 7-month deployment. By August 2026, they had blown right past 250 days total deployed. Naturally, this unprecedented stretch led to significant public friction. Independent media and families of the sailors began reporting severe deployment fatigue, a massive drop in morale, and acute mental health struggles among the crew, with some outlets even alleging sailors were attempting to go overboard. In response, defense officials pushed back. They stated that the conditions aboard the ship were being misrepresented by the media, while still acknowledging the profound strain of such an extended mission. And that leaves us with this final, vital question. How will naval forces balance critical operational demands with the well-being of the sailors who actually power them? The USS Abraham Lincoln is a marvel of human engineering. It's a beacon of humanitarian aid and a fierce projector of military power. But its ultimate limitation isn't nuclear fuel and it's not missile capacity. It's the human endurance of the nearly 6,000 sailors aboard. As deployments stretch longer and longer in an increasingly volatile world, how we answer this question is going to define the very future of global naval operations. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll see you next time.